Hi, I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, bringing you the latest in news and conversation from the extended reality space. And welcome to our mid-year roundup. There's been a lot of interesting developments in 2024, and joining me today is to discuss these current trends and topics. Joining me is Kevin O'Donovan, Jay Latta, Jennifer Rogers, Letitia Bochud, and Amy Peck. I'd like to thank everyone for taking part in this month's Big XR news show, where we'll be reflecting on the past year. One of the big topics over the past year has been digital twins. We've seen digital twin, enterprise digital twin solutions, simulation solutions really take centre focus, especially after events like GDC. I wanted to kick off this conversation by asking one of you lot how digital twins are optimising today's enterprise workflows. Amy, would you be able to kick us off and perhaps give us an insight into how digital twins have changed enterprise workflows in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think as with all of this technology, it sort of feels like it dropped from the sky because it just becomes a lot more prevalent. We have Kevin here, and I and Jay, we've all been working with companies that have deployed different versions of digital twins. You've had especially within, heavy manufacturing, they've been using digital twins, simulation, and then, even kind of traditional AI, which apparently now we have to say traditional AI versus Gen AI. So I think we're at this point now where there's much more interest in these. I'm actually in Toronto right now, and I did one roundtable last year, and they asked me to do another one this year, which I did on Monday, and then I'm doing another one on Thursday because there's just so much interest. But there's really a pretty broad scale of, companies that are just looking at it and getting interested in it versus those that are deploying. But, you mentioned GTC, and the work that NVIDIA is doing. Unity has, great capabilities around digital twin. You can actually combine the two. You start looking at NVIDIA's AI stack, which is where that also, like the Omniverse realm, starts to get really interesting because now you can apply not only the simulation, but bringing in LLMs to be able to organically interact with the data. So I think there's just, the technology has evolved to the point where, and I've always believed that digital twins are foundational to companies and to be able to optimize operations and just get better data, better visibility. So I think we're just at the precipice now. We're going to start to see that hockey stick of companies, almost all companies having some way of leveraging digital twin in their processes.
Fantastic.
Let me hop in here. Yes, I completely agree with Amy. Like I agree with Kevin and all the other experts. The thing is, yes, it's boosting. What we see right now or in the past 6 months is an increased featureitis. So companies, they want to look into it. Some are brave, some are starting some things, but there is no standard so far. There are different ecosystems, which makes it harder. If one simply turns out not to be your optimal thing, then you can't really shift. So it goes somehow also hand in hand with the cloud providers. Microsoft is completely fucking up the whole ecosystem because they are heavily bundling their own shit with Azure and make it easier so that you can simply sneak into Azure as soon as you want to leave. Your expenses are tripling or even 5 times higher, which preserves any kind of active development, any kind of competition to get for a company what is best for your needs. So here we see this huge crack in on the one side, companies that have no clue what does it mean. Featureitis, if they use this, then we need it as well. Only a few companies are really somehow leading in their digital twin initiatives, combining the products with the right modules. But this huge thing that you might be trapped or this classical vendor lock-in when you are being trapped with one company, which makes, of course, any kind of deeper interest really to going into a proof of concept. A little bit hard because what kind of devices do you start using, because avoiding to be trapped somewhere else. GDPR compliant, then you have the cloud decision, then you have and so on and so on. So here it's really, on the one side, yes, it's boosting. On the other side, you have this kind of handbrake that is still preventing that it really goes forward.
So I'd agree with most of what Jay said, not all, but you know, as Amy said, so I agree with what Amy said. I agree with most of what Jay you said. Hi Microsoft. Cut a long story short, my 2 cents. Digital twins are almost up there with the hype cycle of AI in the enterprise world in the past 12 months. And I think that's a good thing. Now, the feature is that my digital twin is better than your digital twin. And actually, my digital twin does something completely different than your digital twin, because the point being we're at in the industry right now is some people say, I have a digital twin. I've done a LiDAR scan, point cloud, reality capture, math report, whatever, of something. That's a digital twin. Other people have deployed bucket loads of IoT technology. They have real-time information coming in, could be graphical, whatever. That's a digital twin. The design of the building, when I built it 2 years ago, I have a 3D model. That's a digital twin. And the feature is that as I now want to, they're all siloed. As I want to join those together, that's, to Jay's point, you're dead right. That's where the fun starts. Because if I have a point cloud in system X, and I have IoT data coming in from somewhere else in SCADA systems, I'll just join them and then I'll get a real-time digital twin. Theoretically, absolutely. How to do that? Oof. It depends, right? And this is where you do end up with some vendor lock-in. Now, there's the USD with NVIDIA, Microsoft, and others are driving a digital twin standards. There are, what I find interesting is Gartner, IEEE, who else? PwC, many others, the Digital Twin Consortium. They're all coming out now with digital twin maturity models. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the technology and the standards, but it's like, okay, well, I know level 1 is I have a digital representation of something. Level 2, it does something else. Level 3 is something else. Level 4 is where I add simulation. Level 5 is where it's autonomous. And I think we need to start kind of going, hang on a second now, you got a digital twin, great. Where are you? What functionality does it give you? Okay, that's what it is. Who built it and what's in it? Now, how do you stick it together? But I think it's inevitable. This is just the amalgamation of different silos of data. I want to be able to see it, visualize it. AI will play a huge role, generative AI, traditional AI, because most of the digital twins today are traditional AI, right? Not Gen AI. But small language models will probably change that in the future. But I think it's been a great year for digital twins. But I hear from a lot of people going, God, my head's going to explode. If you go to Hannover Messe, any energy event, everyone's got a digital twin. They're all different. So back to Jay's point.
Most of them are actually just models. Like they're calling models digital twin. They're static models. There's no real time. There's no two-way. And they're low poly. Like they're just, they're kind of a mess. Or they've visualized a point cloud without a proper visualization software. So it just looks horrible. But anyway, you get
To my point is if we need that kind of maturity level where you can go, okay, you're doing this, valid. It's a step in the right direction. But, this is not the massive real-time immersive digital twin in the sky that I can hit a simulation key and kind of go, well, what'll happen if I do this and this in the next 3, 6, 9 months, blah, blah, blah. And my business processes and my HR resources and. We're still a long way from that.
We have Jennifer here always, who's then always the voice of reason going, okay, people, here's what we need to do.
Here's what's going on.
And then we want you to start a working group, Jennifer, because you're not busy enough.
I am encouraged as well. I'm just reflecting as I'm hearing everyone speak. I had the privilege of chairing an industrial IoT track at TechX in Santa Clara a couple of weeks ago. And it was interesting, to hear people talking about, obviously, as everyone has said, everyone has a digital twin, right? That doesn't mean the same thing. But, I find it interesting. And I feel like we're at this point where people are starting to talk about that. and talk about, how I'm using this, asset performance management, huge in terms of, application for digital twins. And as we start to talk about even asset performance management in the industrial space, there's a value chain associated with those assets, right? And so, what I am encouraged by, Rory, is I'm seeing people start to talk about that and say, oh, this is an ecosystem and my digital twin has to talk to your digital twin. And then to Kevin's point, if we're not the same level of maturity around that, we may not be able to connect those, right? And so, I think we're getting there. I think from my perspective, what I'm encouraged by is that I am seeing the space really start to kind of narrow in on some specific use cases, like I said, like asset performance management, where everybody can kind of start to come together and look at the ways in which we can move data back and forth. Obviously, artificial intelligence of things, big topic of conversation there too. So not only do we need to render the physical space and data, but we've got to bring forth the transformations that we need and acknowledge that that data is coming from all different parts of a value system or value chain or ecosystem. So that said, I think we're getting there because we're having the right conversations. I was really encouraged to hear people talking about interoperability and concerned about vendor lock-in and the ways in which they could bring together different sources of data and applications in the ways in which makes sense for them from an enterprise perspective. So I think we're in a good place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also should probably touch on some of the challenges as well. You talk about asset performance management, just asset management alone is enough of a problem. Then being able to assess what level of fidelity you need with what type of file format, and then how you funnel it into the digital twin in a way that's accessible. Security is a massive issue, right? Especially for highly secure buildings. Critical infrastructure data centers do not want, anyone to have access to the schematics of the physical space. And then when you start on the front end, on the utility end, bringing devices with outward facing cameras, which is, then one of the ways that you're actually kind of interacting in real time and have that too. You can't have cameras on a manufacturing line with, very, very, significant IP on those manufacturing processes. So all of these things are challenges, but I agree that it's part of, having the conversation. The vendor lock-in in one regard, and I know we're going to talk about Apple in a minute, there is some value to it where, it's just everything kind of works. But, the challenge is that they're not all going to expand the capabilities in the direction that you're going to need as you scale. And then we're going to get back into what made all of the legacy systems such a disaster that they are today, is then you start doing the spit and duct tape to make things work, right? So that's, there's a lot of challenges ahead, but I think, back to the standards and back to, the industry starting to play nicely in the sandbox, which I would say for the most part around most of this technology, they're all doing a really good job right now, right? Because they need to seed the market before then they start, getting back to putting the gloves back on and, really, it's like championing their competitive advantage. And then the expense as well, because we talk about, big data. This is exponentially big data. And a lot of these, cloud applications include consumption models, right? And that will kill you. That is a painful death.
But agreed on the, we were at an AI conference last week, and there was the whole concept of, well, more data always beats a better algorithm, right? Because the masses. But yet in most industry, and in the energy industry, where I spend a lot of time, a lot of great startups will come with some great tools, technology that can take a LiDAR cloud and a point cloud and do this with your IoT data. And they go, oh, but it'll happen in my cloud. And we're on AWS or Azure or whoever. Yeah. And instantly the industry person on the other side of the table going, yeah, can't do that.
Not going to happen.
So there's that feature. But I'll tell you what I think we might be underestimating. If you look at what Qualcomm and NVIDIA and ARM and Intel and. If you look at the amount of compute technology that's coming down to edge devices over the next couple of years, and if you look at AI being used locally, granted it's a smaller data set, but it's just the data from my factory. And if I can start taking that amount of data, I can start doing simulation on my production line in my plant. Doesn't go to the cloud at all. Federated learning, I might get a different model, blah, blah, blah. But cut a long story short, I think this concept that everything has to go to the cloud for a digital twin to be uber digital twin, I think we're going to see that break down. That doesn't get away from it's still a siloed app, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that in 2025 than everything suddenly going to Omniverse or Azure or AWS Twin Maker or whatever. Right? That will happen as well, but I think that a lot of industry is going to be local. And that'll be digital twin on steroids, but inside your walls.
And they're delivering the LLMs directly, right? So they're actually bringing the LLMs or SLM, depending on what type of data that they're leveraging and how much, where they're bringing those into their own environments. And so they're working with their own data. They're building synthetic data on top of their own data. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just reflecting back to the event that I was talking about, and I won't name anyone specifically, but, we had a bunch of enterprise architects there from energy, specifically Kevin. And, it was interesting because they were talking a lot about making those decisions, right? What do you keep locally? What do you put in the cloud? How to make those decisions, which I think is a completely different skill set. And it's encouraging to see that we're starting to develop that skill set, and that, and that people are starting to figure out how to think about those things. But I think that's kind of where we're at, right? We have kind of the people catching up to the technology and starting to understand a little bit more around the key decisions that they can and should make, to not only make the use cases viable for business, but also to deal with security and other constraints that we've talked about.
Who decides in companies? It's not the people that are tech savvy. It's not the people who know their shit. It's mostly the budget owner. It's the one who is depending on the goodwill of the CFO. And these are mostly mentally completely rotten people that only are asking for ROI and the other bullshit. So you will always just get a solution that is what we just need now. It's not forward thinking. When we are, you need, of course, for the company context, you need a hybrid model. Of course, I do not want my manufacturing data to be somewhere sharing through an Oracle Cloud or whatever. So, of course, we will see these hybrid things. But it already starts within the companies itself. When a customer approaches me and they start thinking about this stuff and they have some kind of dashboard nonsense and so on, it already is the appreciation of data. It's the value that you have from informations. They don't get it because IT was always some kind, this kind of step brother, this illegal bastard that you needed somehow to get into the company. IT started mostly just to deal with paychecks, period. So mostly they are somehow trapped in this thinking. Every department started to build their own data sets. And it's simply this what I call this rotten thinking, that I'm the master of my budget, I'm the master of my people, of my headcount, and I'm the master of data. So if I'm a department lead, if I'm a VP of something, I struggle with sharing this stuff for the benefit of others. And as long simply these people have not died out of these companies, we will see this slow, proactive whatever and small startups that can boost anything and simply reduce their own workflow will be the winners.
Well, Kevin was kind enough to invite me to one of his clients' events. He was hosting a roundtable that was actually really just a very large panel. But we were talking about that idea of sharing data, and I love Kevin's remark was, especially around, we're talking about companies actually sharing data, which has its own morass of challenges. But internally, there are certainly problems, but it may not necessarily be for the benefit of others. Kevin was surmising that I can't remember exactly what you said. You were like, if you are controlling data, you better clean it up now, because if you're hiding the fact that you do not have clean data, someone's going to ask you for it soon, and you better have your ducks in a row.
There's skeletons in a lot of closets that people know about.
Yeah, that's why they're afraid to share the data.
Or they think they might be, and it's like anything, not on my watch, I'll be whatever. So, but I think it's changing, and in the energy world, you know, what do you call it? You have a thing called NERC-CIP, right? It's horrendously complicated in terms of it's for cybersecurity of a grid infrastructure in the US. EU has something similar, and it forces you to look at every piece of data you have and put a risk level on it.
Yes.
And this is back to almost every piece of data in your company. You could do the same in terms of IP, secret sauce. Does it matter? Can I anonymize it and whatever? So I think a lot of people are starting to go, not all data is the same, right? Some of it can be crap and we don't care, but this is the really important stuff. And then what do we share and what don't we share? That doesn't necessarily, that's a big exercise that can be done. That doesn't necessarily then turn around and say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll share this data and we won't share that data. Depending on how the system was architected 10 years ago, you may not be able to turn on and off certain attributes for different pieces of data, right? So that's a challenge. That's the real world we live in. And then everyone goes, well, can't separate it, so shut it down. But I still think, you know, as I say, get your data in order, because someone's going to come knocking on the door pretty soon.
You can only see the benefit of these informations. It's not just data, it's informations. If you see the overall picture, we had at one of my former companies / clients, however call them, the so-called an internal project that was called the Potential Finder, which was a framework that crawls through your data lake and identifies unclaimed potential. Hey, check this out, check that out, maybe there is something. But it only works if you have access to this overall thing and not your hidden dragon treasures.
Yeah, and I think the LLMs are going to start to drive that, because as we start to look at, you know, the black box of neural networks, you know, we have to start being able to track the algorithms and the nodes within those algorithms to be able to understand what's getting lit up, how are these models training themselves once we let them go. And, you know, I believe that those two constructs at some point will meet and start helping us understand and actually structure data in these layers, right? So they have grades, they have layers of fidelity, they have layers of, you know, shareability and IP and so forth. And hopefully that'll allow us to loosen the reins a little bit on that top layer that, you know, from an industry perspective, can actually help elevate problems that are endemic across all industries. And cybersecurity is one of those, right?
I thought it's very interesting, because my second question on digital twins would have been directly about challenges. The conversation naturally went there. So that must be front of mind when talking about digital twins, which I think is quite an interesting statement. But I want to go back to something, Kevin, you mentioned, which is the use of digital twins as a simulation tool. This is something I saw quite a lot in NVIDIA's event earlier this year. I think that's a big opportunity for businesses, big opportunity for NVIDIA too. I think it also shows the value of digital twins outside of headsets, outside of conventional XR hardware, because you can access those digital twins via many, many devices. And during that event, I saw digital twins being used for warehouse simulation, even debatably autonomous vehicles, etc. So before we move on to new to Apple's event and Meta's event later on in the year, could you perhaps talk about some of those use cases from warehouse simulation onwards that digital twins are seeing usage in, and perhaps what value propositions are those bringing?
So in many ways, as Amy said earlier, the digital twin is kind of like the building block. But in my world, it's the ability to do the simulation, as you mentioned. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In grids, electric grids, if I want to try and figure out, well, if Jay and Amy and all the other cool people go off and buy loads of electric vehicles, their electric Ferrari, and plug it in, how many of them can I simulate on a network somewhere? You know, what transformer is going to blow up, or do I need to change, or whatever. So being able to simulate all that gets utilities way ahead. In terms of inside in a factory, if I need to change the production line, can I simulate? Can I make it go faster? If I run, instead of 2 shifts a day, I run a 3rd shift. It's all robots, right? So it shouldn't matter. But is there anything that I need to do predictive maintenance on because something's going to break when I don't know? So all of those kind of things are there today. Now, forget about I'm going to design the new hydrogen power plant in the future and I'll design that in a computer and simulate it. I think the thing that people might sometimes miss with digital twin is that you can simulate because you have all of the design data and how things will work in that system, including physics models, electrical models, and. If you give me a LiDAR scan, a point cloud, reality capture, I can't apply a physics model to that. I can't do simulations on that. And that's where the kind of the people go, but I have a digital twin. Now you have a reality capture LiDAR photogrammetry thing. It's going to be very hard to plug in simulation into that. So I think this is where people kind of go, oh, hang on a second. If I design it and build it in a piece of software from any vendor, then I can do simulations. But that's where the world is going. Everybody wants to be more resilient. Can I game things out? That's where simulation comes in.
So, and here comes the thing. I know from several of my clients that they, for example, let's say in automotive, to develop a car costs in average 800 million. To build a manufacturing facility is another 1.2 to 1.6 billion, depending on the location. So of course, when you build this entity, or even if you upgrade to a new model, you need to change the assembly lines and so on. In the past, we've been building, for example, cardboard models to simulate in real life how this might be, where is some kind of step. Nevertheless, if you then have your assembly line ready and so on, it takes an average something around 3 months till half a year to really clean everything out, to have this smooth process. Then you have to reshift it and so, which means at least 150 million extra to repair all of the stuff that you've not thought about. With NVIDIA Omniverse, for example, that has this simulation capability. We are right now able, let's say, in automotive, they are preparing a new, or let's say in aviation, a new type, whatever. You can start already pre-simulating while you are planning your vehicle. You can start pre-simulating what kind of plant, how should my supply chain look in the future. So this is already something that saves you crap loads of money to repair afterwards. You do not need to repair afterwards. This is the first thing. Then when you go into production, if you dock on all your suppliers, if you get live data from these guys, you can identify bottlenecks. You can identify, okay, just-in-time production, here something is missing. So how can I reroute my other stuff? How could it look like in 5 hours, in 12 hours? How will it look like in 2 days? So you really are becoming a super powerful in managing your major incidents. And this is something that really saves you crap loads of money that pays for this technology itself. And if we are then deep diving into from digital twins of the production, towards surveys and let's say even into the dealerships, when it goes into the product itself, when your vehicle, if it's a train, if it's a plane, if it's whatever, have an own digital twin, then you are on a completely different level, even in maintaining these things, giving them software-defined yada yada whatever. So here we are, in fact, facing through this digital twin a complete new economy.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a significant investment. It's challenging for companies to kind of bite it off, but it is a build it once and then start to scale and leverage. Again, different ways of parsing data. And I think another great use case is around ESG. Now that we're really having a lot of regulatory come down around ESG goals and targets for companies, these 2030 goals that we sort of, carefully made up, we can start to put some structure around them. And then we can layer, so we've got a multinational company with physical spaces around the world under different regulatory requirements and reporting. then you start to ingest the regulatory for each of those environments. You're able to start to build those reports in real time. So not only can you be compliant, but you can then run the simulations to understand how are you going to meet these goals. And so there's so much utility, and companies just have to find that way to plug in. Start with your highest value problem. Shutting down a manufacturing line in a planned way because you've done the predictive maintenance on it, versus having it go down in the middle of a day. It's a significant difference in your ROA. Start there, fix that problem, and then leverage the digital twin for every other aspect of your business.
Yeah, to your point, Amy, on the simulation aspect, I think there are a couple of different directions we've been talking about. One is around the idea, essentially, of what you just said. What are the specific risk profiles that we want to start with to model out, different simulations that help us to make decisions, hopefully in a predictive way, in which, some of these critical incidents don't take place. Some of that happens in industrial, in more controlled environments like manufacturing, but also with critical infrastructure, right? Looking at the ways in which we detect corrosion and different aspects that are really critical. In that regard, we also need to model those things out, and there are specific risk profiles and data to enable that. I think on the other side is kind of, you mentioned this with the ESG. The ways in which we envision new ways of doing things. I think about energy transition. And for example, many of you have probably seen GE Vernova's digital twins, where they're modeling wind farms and the ways in which they can actually create enough energy through the positioning of assets. All of those things I think are really exciting and incredible. And I think simulation does play a huge role. It gets back to everything that we've said, right, about interoperability and the ways in which we're actually inputting data and then constructing what we expect to see from that data in a simulation perspective for them to actually be of value to organizations.
Yes, I wanted to first concur, and also it's definitely a streamlining and efficiency raising technology. I would say here I've seen it used in hospital environment, with the new hospital being built and the digital twin being used for the entire staff, not only doctors or emergency units, but the entire staff, cleaners included, to actually know their way within the new hospital to be efficient on the first day, and also obviously, for life-saving emergencies, but for regular nurses as well, to be, to find their orientation right away. And I thought that was really clever, but it hasn't been remodeled afterwards. You have these trailblazing, pioneering minds, but then either they don't advertise on it enough, or they don't give the feedback or the positive impact it has had, or we don't hear from it. We hear from it ahead of the simulation taking place, but then what has been the implication and the value added for the professionals, we don't know about, really. It should be at that point, in my sense, that we should have some more feedback.
You're describing an example of exactly that end-to-end, right? Where you start with the pre-planning and you train people in parallel during the build cycle, then take that digital twin of the environment. There's going to be some rework that needs to happen, but then you wire that into your building management system, your BMS, and start to, and then your IoT devices. Look at how people are moving through the space. Do you need to have the lights on in this area at all times? Do just optimizing even just the, HVAC system, the electrical system, then repairs, and then running simulations on top of that. So that would be a perfect use case right there.
And to take it even further down the line, and to hear from it, to gather the evidence and the analytics afterwards.
So the feature you're bringing up, and it's a very valid one, and this is back to Jay's point earlier. If anybody is building anything new today, I don't care what, a house, a factory, a nuclear power plant, whatever, it is designed on a computer. So it has got a 3D model. And most of the ones that you use, whether it's from, pick any of the vendors, there will be simulation software in there, as Jay says, to say, well, can we knock out some of the kinks in the way we're designing it so we don't build it and then figure it out the wrong way. The feature is that you design it, you build it. Sometimes the guys who are designing it and the tool they're using are not talking to the guys who are deploying it with the tools they're going to use for the IoT systems. And then when they go to join them together to create that feedback loop so we can update the model and update the training and they go, oh, these things don't talk to each other. And we're back into the digital twin maturity model with, well, we've got silos. So I do think what people will start to look at a bit more going forward as they build new things is that, how do I build it so that it will integrate? Now, whether that leads you into a walled garden approach or whatever, but someone's going to have to make a decision as to, well, how do we join the dots here with what we have today and going forward for the next 5 years? And sometimes some people are like, well, we'll buy sensors from God knows who in 5 years' time and we'll plug them in, they'll be fine. No, that won't work anymore. So I think that's another cultural change.
Brilliant. And talking about the walled garden, that's a perfect little segue there into our next topic, which will be WWDC, which of recording took place last Monday. While there wasn't, debatably, I'd say there wasn't massive major, say, device news, etc., but there was pretty groundbreaking news in terms of regional availability, I believe starting next month or very soon at the very least. But Apple WWDC, they announced new regional availability in the EU and other areas outside the US. They also introduced enterprise APIs too. Obviously, this continues Apple's productivity journey, but I'm curious to learn from your perspectives what that trickle-down effect might be. AWE is taking place currently, and I feel like that provides a nice opening up of at least interest, perhaps investment too, into these continuing sectors, just again due to that classic example of Apple bringing eyes and money to the space. Letitia, it'd be great to hear from you first. How do you feel about Apple's latest announcements, and do you think that's going to have a trickle-down effect onto some other hardware, software solution providers, etc.?
It's a budget matter, and most people who are onboarding or starting with this technology, they first want to either have a competitor that has been trying it on, so they will, match that budget, or they will try with a lesser pricey device. And this is why here in Europe, the Quest is it has the maximum power for now, and its penetration has been excellent, really. So I would rather say that we're looking for the Pro and the Lite versions rather than to onboard AVP. It's a bit, it will come eventually, but for now since we're slow at embracing the technologies for productivity and industrial use, perhaps a bit more, we're strategically more prudent, bearish than the US, perhaps, and it's all down to budget. I don't know, Jay, perhaps you have a different view on it, but from my perspective, we're very cautious.
So the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's AVP or any other Apple device, except for the iPhones. In Europe, we've been a little bit more careful with Apple products. I mean, I remember when in the US Macintosh was something completely normal and so on. We did not have this in the European landscape. Working for a university, it was always somehow something different. Meanwhile, Apple became some kind of CEO level gadget toys. And of course, freelancers buy this stuff. I mean, I'm one of these guys that buys it. On the broader landscape, to give this to employees is a little bit harder. Because then, of course, you are right. It's always about the budget. Why should I pay this much of money if I can get something from another one that I have to throw away in 2 years for half the price? So yes, of course, we in Europe are a little bit more cheaper when it comes into this. We call this ROI and KPIs. From the pure performance, I don't know. The AVP it's still something. I love the device, but it's still something that is, there is not this unique selling point for it. It's still missing. I see it more in the area about creatives. You've seen this new Blackmagic camera that will do some stereoscopic and so on and so on. So here it might be something. It might be a nice thing for marketing and advertising agencies. In the broader adoption in the industry, nah, not so much.
I think we'll get there, though. I mean, they're targeting the developers, right? I mean, this is the first version is developers. You know, the V2 will likely be developers and very, very early adopters. And you're going to start to see these show up in R&D centers. A lot of the, you know, like one of our biggest clients has, you know, probably 10 scattered through the company, and they're doing some really interesting work. I think if you compare Meta with Apple's, you know, kind of privacy policies, and it's not to say that Meta is not offering significant privacy policies, you know, for enterprise, but it's just that the perception and from a branding perspective, Apple is much more known for the privacy. Now opening up APIs into the, you know, the main camera gives developers a lot more flexibility on you know, how they're going to leverage that data. And so I think what'll happen is, you know, Apple will triangulate, you know, developers, end user needs, and then their opinion on where the market really needs to go and where they think they're going to get the most penetration. And then by the time you see V3 come out, it's going to be that App Store moment that happened on the iPhone, right? Where you start, they've now figured it all out, and that whether Meta gets there first remains to be seen. But the great news for all of us is the race is on.
I just wanted to say also for the research centers, because academics are so strong in Europe and they kind of lead the way always to bringing new technologies to the market. For now, those are two pricey devices also for the academic side. And this is why perhaps the V2 will help embrace this race here as well.
So a couple of quick points, if I may. I'd agree with most of the stuff. And first of all, what they announced and the APIs, I think that's good from Apple in terms of they're actually opening up some of their black box. So you can build apps to do your stuff. Letitia, your point on the price point is very valid. I don't see every remote worker suddenly having a $5,000 headset. But that said, if I want a good VR headset from VRARA or HTC or whoever, I'm paying the same money. So it depends on the use case. If I can save 20 grand on a thing, 5 grand is whatever. It's not for everyone. So it depends on the use case. So I think that the cost thing is whatever. What I would have a few more concerns about, and I Meta's the same in enterprise, in energy, in industry. If you look at Apple's announcement, I don't know how this is all going to work or whatever, but it's like, okay, well, you can set up the privacy and the whatever. Now, Apple privacy was brilliant until the announcement with the open API last week, right? So let's see how that plays out. But cut a long story short, well, you can manage all this through Apple's Business Manager. I don't know how many organizations in energy use Apple Business Manager as their application deployment tool in the enterprise. So like, is that like a not playing that game? Because everybody uses multiple different device management tools, application management, blah, blah, blah. Your privacy, you'll sign on with your Apple ID. This is back into you just sign on with your Meta ID. In most companies, they're going, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, Meta allow ways around that. Who knows how this will play out? So I think just reading the press announcement, good that they're opening up all these things. Well, it's a developer option. Amy, to your point, it's version 2, wait till version 3, 4, whatever. Price point, maybe there'll be a cheaper version. One thing I did find funny, and I watched all the videos and whatever, in all the videos of the application use cases, all the cool videos and all the cool graphics they showed, not one worker was wearing a Vision Pro. They were all wearing generic headsets and cameras and whatever. Like, the Vision Pro is a beautiful device. I've used it. It's brilliant. Not sure I'd wear it for 8 hours in my head. And that feature, and that's the same with Quest, right? So everybody, but I think overall, I think it's good. But this is not Nirvana.
Jennifer, could you give us some of your thoughts on the latest Vision Pro news before we just move on to our final subject for the conversation?
Yeah, no, so I'll echo a lot of what everyone's already shared. It is encouraging that we're opening up APIs. I think we will all vehemently agree with that. That is a good step, right? And it also does allow some experimentation, some understanding of the ways in which we can bring all of this together. I do agree around the form factor piece that Kevin just brought to the table. I think as a space as a whole, we've still got a lot of things to figure out in terms of how we would actually apply this in a true connected worker, augmented worker kind of scenario, but all encouraging things. I think the theme is the same as I think last month when we talked about some of the Meta announcements. Investment in this space and the ability to open up access for developers to really kind of piece together the ways in which these solutions can work is a good thing. Right. So, happy to see it, happy to see the ways in which we can potentially, I bring this up every time, but really think about the humans in this scenario and the ways in which the technology can serve them to make their lives better and to make the businesses that we all work in or support successful as well. So, it's encouraging. I think we've got a long way to go, but happy to see a little bit of opening, maybe a little bit of light shining through that'll help us all to work together from an interoperability perspective.
Fantastic. And just to continue on, I was going to originally mention just Meta in this last piece, but I think this really expands to other headset vendors and providers, whether it be smart glasses too. I think XReal are an interesting player in this game, even just from a consumer point of view, but they've also got productivity features too. But Meta Connect's coming up soon, and it's going to come up quickly. Obviously, they're going to probably try and announce something to either jump off the back of Apple's current developments or try and steal that interest and those eyes. Another interesting point over the past few months is John Carmack, who was their previous CTO, if I'm correct, came out and kind of dismissed the Quest Pro a little bit, which I think it has quite a lot of similarities to the Vision Pro in its own right. But I'm interested, Jennifer, perhaps you can continue on from your thoughts, but I'm interested to learn a little bit more about how do you think Meta is going to react now that WWDC has concluded, now that they're reaching broader audiences, and do you think some other players in the market are also going to take steps to leverage that current interest and perhaps some of the new updates?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, based on everything that we've been talking about, right, and the capabilities around, more advanced headsets and software and apps to support kind of that MR environment, I think all of that is needed in this space. It's the right step forward. So I'm not surprised that we see Apple making major announcements around Pro, that we see Meta making huge maybe not huge announcements, but they are working on Pro. Yes, I think we will see other players come into the space. I'm hopeful that we will also see, as we've been talking about, some players come to the table that are very interested in the interoperability angles and maybe more traditionally oriented toward an open architecture. Honestly, I think that's a lot of where this needs to go to really kind of get beyond the developer stage that we were talking about before and really make an impact in industry. I would be really interested to see what announcements are on the horizon beyond even a Meta announcement, because I think as we bring all of these pieces together, we've really got an opportunity here. I think all of us would echo the idea that the walled garden approach is very limited, in its scope and its scalability. And so I'm thrilled to see what we might see in terms of announcements from others coming forward that have a slightly different way of thinking about this, and the ways in which they play with others, so to speak, in the ecosystem.
The interview with Carmack was quite interesting because it showed this kind of, let's say, number cruncher approach. When he complained about that Meta does not understand that it has to cover as well the development cost, not just the manufacturing cost, yada, yada, yada. It's complaining on a completely luxurious level. Maybe this is the reason why he's ex-CTO, whatever. The thing is, if you want to progress, you need to take risks, period. And it might cost in the beginning. Otherwise, you are just a follower. So going ahead, opening up, doing the first steps is definitely, even if you are not the winner, is the necessary impulse of simply to revive this overall over 60 years of development in XR, right? So right now, to really boost it, more and more need to step out and simply do pro devices. Do them smaller to make them more efficient, more portable, and finally to open it up so that we as consumers, as professionals, get what we finally want.
There's a very limited number of companies that can afford the development. I mean, can afford to do this. So we need these companies to do it.
Yeah. And to this point, to both your points, I thought, the partnership with Microsoft is the strongest justification to use a headset for now, because people know the environment. They know what they can do with it and what it runs on. Or, for instance, we know the World Economic Forum has embraced the mesh technology because it is Microsoft and they have already a partnership with Microsoft. So also it will become a software, not only a hardware. I mean, it is already. That's what we're saying when we're speaking of opening up, right? But I think that might be the core decision people make at the end. It's for what it runs on and not how it runs.
They might announce a new pro version. Who knows, right? But I kind of go with the point. It doesn't matter. This is not a hardware play. If it was Division Pro, if we stopped the race today and said best technology with all the bits and pieces from everybody, Vision Pro wins, right? Now, other people would say, well, my lenses are slightly better or my sound is agreed. Apple was never best at everything. They were always best at putting lots of things together, right? So, but the next silicon chips and the next controllers and the next lenses are going to be better. So whatever. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure Meta lost anything by cancelling Pro, because they weren't going to win the enterprise by having a better device. It's the software, it's the ecosystem. If we don't get the digital, if you can't feed the device with a digital twin that's got use or a use case or something, or if it's still too heavy, nobody cares, right? It's the kind of the weak link. The hardware isn't the only game in town. So I think if they're spending a lot more money and getting a cheap version of Quest 3 or whatever they're calling it, and whatever the Quest 4 will be, and more consumers are using that, then we'll see them going to their employers going, we need to use this stuff for this specific use case in our job. Why aren't we doing this? So I think that's the key.
It's about the use cases. It's always. And also the quality of the headsets. So I need a pro in a pro environment. It's not to watch Netflix movies. With this, we should as well start again, hopefully talking about the user interfaces. Because we mostly are completely overloading all of these digital twin environments or any kind of other XR environment where it stops being helpful. I mean, one of the most critical things I've seen was in defense. When you are wearing your headset and you are so overloaded with informations. In the battlefield, you need just one information. Where is the target? period.
Stay alive.
I don't need all of this other bullshit. So instead of doing two overloaded things that overwhelm you with informations, it needs to go towards a more natural experience. So if your picture, let's say, starts on the ends somehow fading away, if it starts to be blurry, then you know intentionally or naturally that something might come from this area. So it's really about, more people need to think about the users. Do you need high resolution in this use case? Do you need a low resolution? What is the language that we are talking? And this is still something that majority of the companies are missing. It's this featureities, it's this completely overloaded stuff to showcase. It's like bitheads are doing something that is not appealing. You don't want to use it.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's a great solution. It's fast. It gives you all the informations, but you want to scratch your eyes away.
Well, actually, so both of you have made points that I think are really, really important. So Kevin, I actually agree with you that more consumers is better, and that, it's not the killer app that we're looking for, it's day-to-day utility. And though I think there's, consumer driving some of this adoption, but there's a lot of enterprise adoption, but consumers are the workforce. And as soon as they start to have a fluency with the technology, we've said this ad nauseum for years, then they're going to start to understand, all right, how can I optimize this at work? In the exact same way that they're using ChatGPT today already, quickly, instantaneously, which is why that took off like fire. And then from Jay, what Jay mentioned is very, very true. And I've worked with sort of, most of the OEMs over the years, and especially with, HoloLens, Magic Leap, and like the true MR glasses. And now that we have pass-through, one of the number one use cases still is see what I see, which is just very baseline technology that the devices have been able to do for years. And so I agree. I think we should have a mechanism to really shut down that user interface and keep it very, very simple. And it's like, Photoshop. You can use, Photoshop Lite or Express or Lightroom, where you have just a few tools. Or if you really want to take advantage of the full suite, but make sure that it's incredibly simple to use.
I saw an announcement yesterday, right? This is showing my age. This is an old XR controller, right? And I've done the whiteboarding and the taking notes and writing and whatever, and trying to write with one of these things and whatever. Logitech announced yesterday, the day before, a pen that you hold and you pair it to your Quest headset. This is not an ad for Quest. I'm just saying that they're doing with this. They probably do it for others. So I have a pen in my hand and in a virtual, and allegedly they're bringing out like a pad that you hold in your other hand and you can, whatever. So in terms of taking away the friction, now if you look at the Quest 3 controller, it's nice and small, but it's still a bit clunky to write with, right? But imagine if you pick up a pen. The Sony engineering headset has a ring device for scrolling in and out, and a kind of a thing for zooming in and out, different types of controllers. And until you're able to, we see more of those for different use cases that reduce the friction, then you're suddenly going, hey, this is a bit more normal. It's not as clunky. Now, is that the killer app? No.
Yes.
Like maybe I don't even need a pen. I can write with my fingers. But someone like me, I have to have a pen in my hand because I grew up using a pen.
Right.
So I think that kind of, and that, call it openness, and not people designing new peripherals for different devices. I think that's where we're going to get some of this utility. But it's not a killer app, but I think it's all positive. And let's see what they announce in a couple of weeks and whatever. But it's a slow burn.
But can you give us some closing thoughts before we finish off this conversation?
No, I just wanted to jump on what he said, on what Kevin said, because of the Logitech pen. I tried the SensorX. Have you heard of SensorX? They were they came out with the gloves, but gloves, as we know, they won't ever simulate a hand. So they've then switched to the more entertainment aspects of having props. And actually their pen is very, very precise. And I've tried it on, and you can use it also as a prop in film context, or, production context. And that's very interesting as well, the entertainment factor of all these tools, because the showcase that we most have is still entertainment. And so if you start by onboarding people via entertainment and these types of things, then perhaps it's going to also go into a more, broader habit. But here, at least, we have very few consumer facing, quality, I would say, software. Currently, there is an onboarding of Hologate for the police forces in Switzerland. And that's the first. So see, we've been like 10 years into these technologies becoming very public. And it's only now that we're actually accepting them at a simulation level for the police. So we're kind of slow, but getting there. And when we do, it's, bam, it's multi-millions and it's a broader acceptance. So yes, that's what I wanted to say. But yeah. And plus, we just got the news from Vario Teleports software. Have you heard as well? That could be another discussion one day.
Yeah, next month.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, Rory, I think this last round of conversation has been really interesting. Until we can actually do real work in extended reality and or simulate real work the way we really do it, right? Not the way controllers do it, but the way we actually do it. Until we can do that, we haven't quite hit that space yet. But what's exciting to see is all the innovation that will take us there. I think the messaging is still a little bit confusing for people. Meta's got a huge commercial out right now, at least in the States. Some of you may have seen it, where there's a guy putting together a crib for his new baby coming, and he puts on the Quest and watches a video of how to put stuff together and then takes off the Quest and then go builds a thing, which makes no sense whatsoever. At all. But it's all, that commercial has been playing over and over and over here over the last few weeks. I think until we can get the messaging right for consumers, right? It's not like go put on a device you could watch a video you could watch on your phone that shows you how to put something together. You know what I mean? Yeah. Until we can get that right, we're not going to bring consumers along. But when we can bring consumers along by actually helping them to do real jobs that they need to do, then I think we're at that inflection point where a lot of these
ad agencies.
You know the commercial I'm talking about, right? Anyway, if you haven't seen it, go look at it. I'm sure you can find it. It's very confusing to me.
The ad agencies do need to catch up, I think. I did want to just say that I'm very happy that I get to bring you bad art from hotel rooms around the world on a monthly basis. So, and I just want to point out, this is not mine. Like, this is just because I live in hotels. So, this is my caveat for all of these.
I think that's a good point to end, though. I think advert can be some at-home research after this video is completed for our viewers. But on that
we'll teleport next time into your room.
Jennifer, Amy, Letitia, Kevin, Jay, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of this show. Appreciate your insights and your expertise as per usual. For our viewers, if you want to get more XR news, subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out our social pages. Thank you so much, everyone.